The sound of rain beating against the windowpane seemed to synchronize with Melissa Williams' heartbeat. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at her childhood home that she was visiting for the first time in 15 years. The white two-story house felt smaller than she remembered. "Mom, is this Grandpa's house?" Noah asked nervously from the back seat. The 9-year-old boy had never visited his maternal grandparents' home in his life. "Yes, Noah. This is where Mommy grew up." Melissa tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Come on, let's get out. Grandma and Aunt Vanessa are waiting." Even as she unloaded their luggage from the car, Melissa's mind kept replaying the moment she had signed the divorce papers. Her 10-year marriage to Brian had ended because of his repeated infidelities. The final straw had been when she discovered his affair with a colleague. Noah took Melissa's hand, and they walked toward the entrance. Melissa took a deep breath before the door opened. "Melissa, you've finally arrived," Carol Carter greeted her daughter and grandson. She was dressed in a crisp dress, her dyed blonde hair perfectly styled. Her blue eyes scrutinized her daughter from head to toe. "You've lost weight. Divorce seems to suit you," she said with a light laugh. Melissa smiled vaguely. "Thank you for having us." "Hello, Grandma," Noah said in a small voice. Carol hesitated briefly before smiling at her grandson. "Well, Noah. You've grown much bigger than in the photos." She formally patted Noah's head. "Come on in. Vanessa and Lily are waiting." In the living room, Melissa's sister Vanessa was sitting on the sofa with her 11-year-old daughter, Lily. Vanessa was married to Richard, an investment banker, and lived a wealthy lifestyle. "So you've finally come, Mel," Vanessa said without standing up. "I heard things didn't work out with Brian." "That's too bad." There was no genuine sympathy in her tone. Melissa ignored her sister's sarcasm. "Lily, you've grown so much." Lily, with perfect blonde hair and blue eyes like her mother, was wearing what looked like expensive clothes. "Hello, Aunt Melissa," she greeted formally before returning her attention to her cell phone. "Lily, this is Noah." "Your cousin," Vanessa said. "Noah, Lily is at the top of her class at school. Her teachers have high expectations for her." Noah timidly said, "Nice to meet you." Melissa gently put her arm around her son's shoulders. "Noah is very good at music," Melissa said proudly. "His teacher says he has talent." "Well, that's wonderful," Carol said, but there wasn't a trace of interest in her voice. "But talent alone won't put food on the table. Does Brian pay proper child support?" Melissa took a deep breath. "Yes, more or less. But I also work at a music school, so we're managing." "A music school?" Vanessa gave a contemptuous smile. "Can you pay rent with that? Is that why you've come back to Mom's house?" "It's temporary," Melissa said quietly. "Just until we find our own place." Carol sighed. If your father were alive, how worried he would be. The moment her late father Thomas's name was mentioned, Melissa felt a pang in her chest. Her father, who had passed away 5 years ago, was the only one in the family who had loved and supported Melissa unconditionally. After his death, the rift between Melissa and her mother and sister had only deepened. "Dad would have understood," Melissa said in a small voice. "Understood?" Carol snorted. "That you threw away a stable marriage. Thomas was always soft on you, but even he would have been disappointed by this." Melissa was about to argue, but she felt Noah grip her hand tightly. Seeing her son's anxious expression, she decided to change the subject. "Could you show us our room?" she asked. "It's been a long day, and I'd like to rest a bit." "Yes, of course," Carol stood up. "Bring your luggage. I'll show you." As Melissa and Noah began climbing the stairs with their bags, Vanessa called from behind, "Mel, Richard and I stay here every weekend, so don't touch our room." Melissa nodded without turning around. The house had 5 bedrooms: her parents' master bedroom, Melissa's former room, Vanessa's former room, and 2 guest rooms. Surely they would be assigned to one of the guest rooms. Carol climbed the stairs, walked down the hallway, and stopped in front of a small door. Melissa couldn't remember this place. Here it is. Carol opened the door. It's a bit cramped, but should be enough for the 2 of you. Beyond the door appeared a narrow staircase. The attic? Melissa asked in confusion. No, the storage room, Carol said matter-of-factly. Lily is using your old room, and Vanessa and her husband use another guest room. I've turned the other guest room into my hobby room. Melissa was speechless. After she had left, her family had completely erased her existence. A sad certainty spread through her heart that from the moment her father Thomas had passed away, she had lost her place in this house. No one noticed the change in Melissa's expression and squeezed her fingers tightly with his small hand. Melissa looked at her son and smiled faintly. It's okay, Noah, she said quietly. This is just temporary. As they climbed the narrow stairs, Melissa tried to recall her childhood memories of this storage room. She must have been here a few times. With her father Thomas, looking for old Christmas decorations, or packing away things she no longer needed before going to college. But she had never imagined she would end up living here. Be careful, Noah, Melissa called to her son from behind. The staircase was dimly lit, and the wood creaked. After climbing the last step, Carol opened a small sliding door. Dusty air flowed out toward the 3 of them. Carol pressed a switch on the wall, and a dim light bulb illuminated the room. Here it is, Carol said flatly. It needs a bit of cleaning. Melissa and Noah were speechless as they looked around the room. It was a rectangular space about 15 tatami mats in size, with various boxes and furniture haphazardly stacked under a slanted ceiling. At first, Melissa thought dust-covered curtains were covering the windows, but on closer inspection, there were no windows at all. The wallpaper was peeling off the walls, and a worn carpet covered the floor. There's no window, Melissa finally managed to say. Of course not, this is a storage room, Carol answered matter-of-factly. But there is a ventilation fan. She pointed to a small rotary fan. It gets hot in summer, so I've left a fan for you. Melissa tried to take a deep breath but coughed from the dust. Noah also gave a small cough. There's an old bed in the corner, Carol continued. I've also set up a folding bed, so the 2 of you can use them. Let me know if you need anything, and I'll prepare it within reason. Mom, is this going to be my room? Noah asked anxiously. His large brown eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Carol looked down at her grandson and smiled thinly. Be grateful you have a place to stay. It's good enough to have a roof over your head and protection from the rain and wind. Melissa pulled her son close. It's okay, Noah. With a little fixing up, it'll be a nice room. She tried to sound cheerful, but her voice trembled slightly. Footsteps were heard on the stairs, and Vanessa poked her head in. She surveyed the space and wrinkled her nose slightly. Oh, this old storage room brings back memories, Vanessa said. Remember when Dad used to lock us in here when we misbehaved? Melissa frowned. Dad never did that. Maybe not to you, Vanessa said coldly. You were Daddy's favorite. Carol turned to her grandson. Noah, would you like to see Lily's room? It's a very pretty room. Noah looked up at Melissa. Melissa nodded slightly and gently pushed her son's back. Go ahead. I'll be back soon, okay? After watching Carol and Noah descend the stairs, Vanessa immediately changed her attitude. Listen, Mel, she said in a low voice. Honestly, I never thought you would come here. I thought you had more self-respect. Self-respect? Melissa asked with an incredulous expression. I had no choice. Brian said he wouldn't pay for anything besides child support, and my salary alone isn't enough to rent an apartment. That's why I told you that you should have pursued a proper profession instead of being a music teacher. Vanessa folded her arms. I had built my own career even before I married Richard. I don't regret the path I've chosen. Melissa looked straight at her sister. And for Noah, I'll overcome any difficulty. How touching, Vanessa said sarcastically. But face reality. You've failed. You lost a good husband, and now you're living in a storage room. And Noah. She paused. I feel sorry for him. Compared to Lily, he's a pitiful child. Melissa felt her cheeks flush with anger, but she held it back. Noah is a wonderful child. Don't think of him as pitiful. Of course, that's what you would think, Vanessa shrugged. But let me tell you one thing. Our child comes first. In this house, Lily is the most important. If you don't like it, you can leave. At that moment, Noah's footsteps could be heard coming up the stairs. Melissa quickly composed her expression. Noah returned with Lily, whose face bore a bored expression. Mom, Lily's room is amazing. Noah said excitedly. It has pink walls, a big bed, and even a TV. Is that so? Melissa smiled. How lovely. Noah, we'll make your room nice too, Vanessa said in a sweet voice. Lily, why don't you give Noah some toys you don't use anymore? Lily shrugged. Sure. The baby ones. Noah's face clouded over. Melissa took her son's hand and squeezed it tightly. At that moment, Noah said, Mom, there's something over there, pointing. In front of a large closet in the corner of the room, old clothing cases were stacked. Noah, out of curiosity, started walking in that direction. Be careful, Noah, Melissa said. It's dusty. What's in there? Vanessa asked, showing a bit of interest. I don't know, Melissa replied. I haven't been here for a long time. Noah peered into the closet through a gap in the clothing cases. Mom, there's something big covered with cloth in there. Oh, that's... Vanessa's words trailed off. Could it be? Melissa stood behind Noah and looked into the closet. There was indeed a large object covered with fabric. Let's move these together, Melissa said. Van, can you help? Vanessa hesitated but sighed and came closer. I don't want to get dirty, but just a little. The three of them worked together to move the clothing cases and fully open the closet door. Inside was something covered with a large white sheet. Mom, what do you think this is? Noah asked curiously. He grabbed the edge of the sheet and pulled. The old sheet slid off, and amid the swirling dust, a magnificent black upright piano was revealed. Melissa gasped. Dad's piano. She said almost in a whisper. Vanessa also showed a surprised expression. Why is it here? Wasn't it sold? Melissa approached the piano and gently dusted off its surface. This is the piano your grandfather used to play. She explained to Noah. Dad would play it for me every night. Before I went to sleep. Noah stared at the piano and timidly reached out his hand. Can I touch it? Of course, Melissa smiled. There were tears in her eyes. As Noah nervously pressed one of the white keys, a slightly out-of-tune sound resonated through the room. Even so, the tone felt like a beautiful gift from the past. It needs tuning since it hasn't been played for a long time, Melissa said. You're not planning to use this, are you? Vanessa frowned. The noise will be disturbing. It's okay, I'll buy Noah headphones, Melissa answered quietly. We can't turn down the volume like an electronic piano, but if we set practice times, it shouldn't be a problem. Can you really play the piano, Mom? Noah asked. He had never seen Melissa play the piano. I used to, Melissa answered nostalgically. But I haven't played since I got married. Brian didn't like music. Why does Dad hate music? Noah asked with puzzlement. Melissa hesitated for a moment but then gently explained, everyone has their own preferences. Vanessa looked at her watch and said, I have to go now. Lily, it's dinner time. Let's go downstairs. Lily obediently followed her mother, but at the door, she turned back and waved a small hand, saying, see you later, Noah. After mother and daughter had left, Melissa and Noah stood quietly in front of the piano. Melissa placed her hands on the keys and played a familiar melody. Though the sound was a bit off, it was still beautiful. Wow, Mom! Noah exclaimed in admiration. Teach me too. Melissa looked at her son and, for the first time that day, smiled genuinely. Of course. We'll start little by little tomorrow. She looked around the room. This windowless, cramped, dusty storage room. However, with the discovery of the piano, this place was beginning to transform from a mere shelter into a space with new possibilities. That night, after a simple dinner, Melissa and Noah lay down on the two beds they had been given. Carol had merely handed them old sheets and a thin blanket before saying, good night, and going downstairs. Mom, I'm cold, Noah said in a small voice. Come over here, Melissa pointed to her bed. Noah quickly crawled into his mother's bed and snuggled against her warmth. Are we going to stay here forever? Noah asked. No, it's temporary, Melissa answered, gently stroking her son's hair. Just until Mom finds a new home. But don't worry, as long as we're together, we'll be fine anywhere. Noah nodded. That piano is nice. Yes, Melissa smiled. It was your grandfather's precious treasure. After a while, Noah's steady sleeping breaths could be heard. Melissa gazed at her sleeping son, contemplating the road ahead. No matter how difficult, she had to be strong for her son. At midnight, while Melissa was in a light sleep, the bed moved slightly. She opened her eyes to see Noah quietly slipping out of bed and walking toward the piano in the darkness without even moonlight. Noah. Melissa called softly, but her son seemed to be walking in his sleep. Noah stood in front of the piano, gently opened the lid, and placed his hands on the keys. And strangely, his fingers began to move naturally, and a delicate melody flowed through the room. It was a piece Thomas used to play often, one that Melissa had listened to as a lullaby. Melissa got up from the bed and went to Noah, holding her breath. Noah, how do you know how to play the piano? Noah turned around with a dreamy expression and answered innocently, I don't know, Mom. But my fingers move on their own. There was a strange light in his eyes. Melissa sat next to her son and listened to his playing. This dark, cramped storage room had transformed into a special space filled with music. I wonder if Grandpa is teaching me, Noah suddenly said. Melissa embraced her son and whispered, I'm sure he is. On Saturday morning, a week later, Melissa decided to begin organizing the storage room in earnest. Noah was resting on the living room sofa with a fever from the night before. It was a rare moment where her mother showed kindness to her grandson. Throw this away, keep this. Melissa muttered as she opened one old box after another. Most contained mementos from her childhood. Old dolls, school notebooks, faded photographs. A large wooden box at the back of the storage caught her eye. Melissa pulled it closer and dusted it off. There was no lock, but the lid was tightly closed. This is. She struggled to lift the lid. Inside the finally opened box were various items carefully wrapped. Reaching for a leather-bound notebook placed on top, the first page she opened had Thomas's handwriting, to Melissa, for when you might need it someday. Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes. Her father had thought of her and left something for her. As she flipped through the notebook, there were descriptions and origins of each item. Paintings, an old clock, antique jewelry, first editions. All items her father had collected over the years. "Melissa, the tea is ready," Carol's voice suddenly called from the stairs. "Thank you, Mom. I'll have it later." Melissa hurriedly closed the box and covered it with cloth. She decided to investigate this discovery more thoroughly later. That evening, Noah's fever had subsided, and he headed to the piano as usual. What surprised Melissa was how much her son improved day by day. His fingers glided elegantly over the keys as if he had been practicing for years. "Noah, how did you learn this?" Melissa asked, sitting beside her son. "I don't know," Noah answered innocently. "My fingers move by themselves. I hear the music in my head." The following Wednesday, Vanessa brought her friend David Morrison. David was a reputable music teacher who taught at the local music school. As they entered the house, piano music flowed down from upstairs. "Wonderful playing," David stopped and said. "I didn't know Lily was taking piano lessons." Vanessa was momentarily lost for words. "Well, actually. No, it's not," Lily interjected honestly. "That's Noah. Aunt Melissa's son." David showed a surprised expression. "How old is he?" 9, Vanessa answered grumpily. "May I listen?" David was already heading toward the stairs. Melissa was accompanying Noah's practice in the storage room when she heard a knock at the door. Noah was playing Chopin's Nocturne. Despite some minor mistakes, his expressiveness was incredible for a 9-year-old child. "Excuse me for interrupting," David entered the room. "I was drawn in by the magnificent playing." Melissa stood up and said, "Please come in." Vanessa and Lily followed. "Is this Noah?" David approached Noah and extended his hand with a smile. "I'm David Morrison. Your playing is amazing." Noah smiled back, a bit shyly but proudly. "Is he taking lessons?" David asked Melissa. "No, actually." Melissa explained the situation. How they had found her father's piano, how Noah mysteriously could play, and how he had rapidly improved over the past 2 weeks. David turned back to Noah and asked, "Would you play a bit more for me?" Noah nodded and began playing the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. When the performance ended, the room fell silent. David's eyes showed surprise and emotion. "This is genius," he whispered. "That's an exaggeration," Vanessa said sarcastically. "Just because he's practiced a little." "No, this is innate talent," David said with a serious expression. "He has perfect pitch, and almost no technical issues. Would it be all right if I offered lessons?" Melissa opened her mouth in surprise. "But the money." "Don't worry," David waved his hand. "Talent like this shouldn't be buried. I'll teach him for free." That night, Melissa made a decision. She would have the contents of her father's box appraised. According to her father's notebook, these weren't just mementos, but a valuable collection. And her father had entrusted these to Melissa. The next weekend, after sending Noah to his lesson with David, Melissa selected a few items from her father's box and headed to an antique appraisal shop in a nearby large town. Appraiser Robert Jenkins widened his eyes behind his glasses and said, "This is a remarkable find. Especially this painting, it's undoubtedly an early work by a renowned artist. And this pocket watch, from the 19th century and extremely rare." Melissa listened to the appraiser's words with gratitude for this insurance her father had secretly prepared for her. According to the appraisal results, even just a few pieces were worth far more than she had anticipated. "The total amount will require more investigation, but it will be substantial," Robert said. On her way home, a light of hope kindled in Melissa's chest. Her son's talent and her father's legacy. These two might open a path to a new life for her and her son. When she returned home, David was engaged in an enthusiastic conversation with Noah. "Melissa, wonderful news," David said with shining eyes. "I've recommended Noah for the city's music competition. He'll definitely win a prize." Noah was looking at his mother with an excited expression. "Can I enter, Mom?" Melissa gently stroked her son's hair with a smile. "Of course." The next day, while Melissa was out at work, Carol offered to help clean the storage room. Noah was having a lesson at David's studio. "Thank you, Mom," Melissa said with some surprise but gratitude. "That helps a lot." After Melissa had left for the music school, Carol immediately went up to the storage and began searching for the wooden box her daughter had been concerned with recently. Vanessa, who had been drinking coffee in the living room, followed. "Is it really there? Something valuable?" Vanessa asked in a low voice. "I don't know, but Melissa has been sneaking out and coming back suspiciously cheerful," Carol answered while searching the dusty shelves. "Ah, could this be it?" She found a heavy wooden box, and the two opened it. Inside were carefully wrapped antiques and Thomas's notebook. "It's Dad's notebook." Vanessa flipped through the pages and widened her eyes. "Look, Mom. It says all these are valuable items. And..." She read on and her expression changed. "He's leaving everything to Melissa." "What?" Carol snatched the notebook with an unbelieving face. "Thomas did such a thing." The two brought out the contents of the box one by one and carried them to the guest room. In the afternoon, when Melissa returned home, she discovered her mother and sister arranging the antiques on a table in the guest room. "What are you doing?" Melissa asked with a trembling voice. "Ah, Melissa," Carol turned around. "We found some lovely things. Family treasures. Those were left to me by Dad," Melissa said quietly but firmly. "What are you talking about?" Carol frowned. "These belong to the house, so they belong to the whole family." "You read Dad's notebook," Melissa stepped forward. "Those are presents for me. After I provided a place for you to stay, you want to monopolize the house's possessions." Carol raised her voice. "You came back with nothing after your divorce. What more do you want?" Vanessa interjected, "We have rights too. Dad wasn't just your father." Melissa picked up the notebook and read aloud her father's words. "Melissa, these are yours alone. I hope they will be a stepping stone for your new life." "That's forged," Carol dismissed it. "Thomas wouldn't do something so unfair." At that moment, the doorbell rang, and David brought Noah back. Noah's face was radiant, but as soon as he entered the house, he sensed the tense atmosphere. "What's wrong, Mom?" Noah asked anxiously. David, also sensing the situation, asked, "Is something the matter?" Melissa embraced her son and tried to reassure him, "Everything's fine, we were just having a little family discussion." David looked at Melissa with sympathetic eyes. "Let me know if there's anything I can help with." Carol coldly said, "Outsiders aren't needed in family matters." "I apologize," David retreated, but before leaving, he whispered to Melissa, "I'll call you later." That night, even after Noah had gone to bed, the argument between Melissa, her mother, and her sister continued. Carol insisted, "While you're in this house, everything should be shared," and Vanessa agreed, "Dad loved all of us, there couldn't be such an unfair distribution of inheritance." Melissa returned to the storage exhausted. Noah was already asleep, but there were traces of tears on his cheeks. She kissed her son's forehead and pondered in the dark, windowless room. The next morning, when the family conflict reached its peak, Melissa found Noah crying while playing the piano. "Mom, I want to leave here." Noah's trembling voice solidified Melissa's resolve. "I understand, Noah," she quietly answered. That day, on David's advice, Melissa consulted with lawyer Janet Clark. Janet authenticated Thomas's handwriting and confirmed that it had legal effect as Thomas's will. Simultaneously, she began arrangements to sell some of the antiques to prepare a deposit for a small apartment. "This is legally sound," Janet said. "Your father clearly intended this as a gift to you." 3 days later, when Melissa returned home with legal documents, there was a change in Carol's attitude. Shown documents proving that the antiques were Melissa's property, the old woman's lips trembled. "Melissa, I don't want to lose you," Carol suddenly said tearfully. "I was just afraid. Afraid that you would leave and never come back." Melissa was surprised by her mother's change, but her decision remained unchanged. "Mom, Noah and I need a fresh start." "But where will you go?" Carol asked anxiously. "David introduced me to a place," Melissa answered. "A small apartment near the music school. It's convenient for Noah's lessons, and I can work there too." Vanessa still maintained her cold attitude, but Lily seemed sad to part with her cousin Noah. "Noah, can I come visit sometimes?" she asked with an unusually sincere expression. On moving day, Carol quietly handed Melissa an old album. "These are photos from your childhood. Take them with you." Melissa took the album and lightly kissed her mother. "Thank you, Mom." When loading the luggage into the car, Melissa had arranged for the piano to be transported as well. "It was a challenge to get it out of the storage, but it's worth it," David said while helping. Finally, Melissa returned to the storage room alone to reflect on the past 2 months. They had been difficult days, but also a turning point for her and her son. It was also a place where she had felt her father Thomas's love and guidance. "Thank you, Dad," Melissa whispered. "With your gifts, we can start a new life." When they arrived at the small apartment, Noah ran around excitedly. "There are windows. Mom, look, I can see the sky." Melissa watched her son with a smile. A new path had opened before them. 2 years after opening her music school, Melissa's studio had become a reputable place in the area. Melissa saw off her last student and gazed at her reflection in the windowpane. Confidence dwelled in her eyes, and her hair had grown to her shoulders, adding elegance. This small business, started with the proceeds from selling the antiques, had succeeded beyond her expectations. "Well done," David approached from behind and gently placed his hand on Melissa's shoulder. The two had become close while jointly operating a music program for children, and they had begun dating 6 months ago. "I'm looking forward to Noah's concert," David smiled. "Yes, his first solo performance," Melissa answered proudly. Now 11 years old, Noah was making his mark at the music school and was being invited as a soloist at regional concerts. His musical journey, which had begun in that storage room, was now becoming a stepping stone to a full-fledged career. In the evening, arriving at the concert hall, Melissa and David headed to Noah's dressing room. Seeing Noah nervously adjusting his tuxedo bow tie, Melissa felt her eyes well up. "Nervous?" she asked her son. "A little," Noah answered honestly. "But my fingers remember, so I'll be fine." As the performance time approached, Melissa and David headed to their seats. Entering the hall, Melissa gasped. In the back rows, she saw Carol. For 2 years, Melissa had barely been in contact with her mother. She only occasionally heard updates through Lily. She never expected Carol to come to Noah's concert. As the performance began and Noah appeared on stage, the venue fell silent. The moment he sat at the piano and played the first note, Melissa's heart swelled with pride. The beautiful melody of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 resonated throughout the hall. When the performance ended, the audience gave a standing ovation. Seeing Noah bow deeply, Melissa couldn't hold back her tears. After the concert, Melissa faced Carol in the lobby. At their first reunion in 2 years, both were at a loss for words. "It was a wonderful performance," Carol finally spoke. "Noah's talent is genuine. Thank you, Melissa answered quietly. Your judgment was correct, Carol admitted. Thomas might have known. What about Vanessa? Melissa asked. She's struggling, Carol sighed. Richard's business failed, and they divorced. But she's too proud to ask for help. Melissa nodded. How's Lily? She talks about you often, Carol smiled. She seems to keep in touch with Noah. On Christmas Eve, Melissa gathered the courage to invite Carol to her new home. From the living room window, a snowy landscape was visible, and the flames from the fireplace softly illuminated the room. Carol teared up watching Noah play on the piano brought from the former storage room. How proud Thomas would be if he could see this, Carol whispered. Melissa smiled quietly. Dad was watching all along. That's why he guided us to that storage room. Outside the window, snow began to fall quietly, giving a sense of hope for the new year.